I was thrown out on the street at 18 just because my brother stole money from my father's credit card and blamed me for it. For 6 years, my family acted like I didn't exist until one day they suddenly appeared at the door of my $1 million mansion demanding, "You owe us. Without us, you would never have survived." So here's the thing about being kicked out at 18 with nothing but a backpack and a $20 bill in your pocket. You learn real quick who actually cares about you. And spoiler alert, sometimes it's nobody from your own family. My name's Jake, and this is a story of how I went from sleeping in a beat-up van to owning a $1 million house in sunny California, while my family, who threw me away like yesterday's trash, now wants a piece of what I built. Let me take you back to where it all started. Growing up, my dad had this charming nickname for me. He called me the spare part. Yeah, you heard that right. Not son, not buddy, not even hey you. Spare part. Like I was some kind of backup generator sitting in the garage just in case the real thing stopped working. The real thing, by the way, was my older brother Ryan. Golden boy Ryan who could do no wrong. Star quarterback Ryan who got a new truck for his 16th birthday while I got a used bike from a garage sale. Ryan who got college funds and family vacations and all the attention while I was just kind of there, taking up space at the dinner table. I wasn't a bad kid. I actually had dreams of my own. I loved working with my hands, building things, making stuff look beautiful. But every time I tried to show my dad something I made or talk about maybe starting my own landscaping business someday, he'd just grunt and go back to watching Ryan's game highlights for the millionth time. Mom wasn't much better. She had this way of looking right through me, like I was a window instead of her son. All her energy went into organizing Ryan's life, making sure he had the right connections, the right opportunities, the right everything. Then came the incident that changed everything. Ryan, being the responsible adult he supposedly was, had gotten himself into some serious trouble. He'd blown through thousands of dollars gambling online. Yeah, Mr. Perfect had a little addiction problem that nobody wanted to talk about. But here's where it gets good. Instead of owning up to it, Ryan did what Ryan does best. He blamed someone else. Specifically, he blamed me, told our parents I'd stolen Dad's credit card, and racked up all those charges. Said he caught me but was trying to protect me, because that's what good brothers do. I remember that day, so clearly it still makes my blood boil. I came home from my shift at the grocery store, tired and hungry, ready to just crash in my room. Instead, I walked into an ambush. Dad was standing in the living room with his arms crossed. Mom was crying on the couch. And Ryan was there too, looking all concerned and disappointed like he just found out his little brother was a criminal. Dad didn't even let me put my bag down. He just started in on me about responsibility and betrayal, and how he'd raised me better than this. I tried to explain, tried to tell him I hadn't touched his card, hadn't even known about the charges until that very moment. But he wasn't hearing it. The worst part wasn't even the accusations. It was the look in his eyes, like he'd been waiting for me to screw up, like this confirmed everything he'd always suspected about me. The spare part had finally broken down for good. Ryan stood there the whole time, playing his role perfectly. He even put his hand on my shoulder at one point, told me it was okay to admit what I'd done, that the family would work through it together. The nerve of this guy. He was stealing thousands of dollars, and somehow I convinced everyone I was the thief. I begged him to check the dates, the times, the locations of the charges. I had time card from work. I had witnesses. I had proof I couldn't have made those purchases. But Dad had already made up his mind. In his world, Ryan was incapable of lying, and I was incapable of telling the truth. That's when he said the words that still echo in my head sometimes. He pointed at the front door and told me I was a fraud, that I needed to leave, that I needed to figure out my life and learn some lessons about honesty and family. Mom just sat there crying, not saying a word in my defense. Ryan actually had the audacity to look sad, like he was losing a brother instead of framing one. And me? I was 18 years old, being thrown out of my own home for something I didn't do, by people who were supposed to love me no matter what. I went upstairs, threw whatever I could fit into my old-school backpack, and grabbed the cash I'd been saving for my grocery store job. $20. That's what I had to start my new life. $20 and a broken heart. When I came back downstairs, Dad handed me one more thing. A lecture about making better choices, about how this was for my own good, about how sometimes tough love is the only love that works. I didn't argue. What was the point? He'd already decided who I was, and nothing I said was going to change that. I walked out that door and didn't look back. Not because I was strong or brave, but because if I looked back, I might have started crying, and I wasn't about to give them that satisfaction. The first night was the hardest. I ended up in a Walmart parking lot, sitting in an old van that belonged to a friend's older brother who'd said I could crash there for a few days. It smelled like old pizza and regret, but it was shelter, and beggars can't be choosers. I remember lying there in the dark, listening to cars come and go, families loading groceries into their trunks, kids arguing about what cereal they wanted. Normal family stuff. Stuff I apparently didn't get to have anymore. But here's what really got me. It wasn't the discomfort or the fear or even the hunger. It was the silence. My phone didn't ring. No text came through. Nobody from my family reached out to check if I was okay, if I'd found a place to stay, if I needed anything. They'd erase me, just like that. 18 years of being their son, their brother, their family member, and they deleted me like a spam email. Ryan got away with his lies. Dad got to feel righteous. Mom got to avoid conflict, and I got a parking lot and a van that smelled like failure. That night, lying there in the dark, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to be the spare part anymore. I wasn't going to be the family scapegoat, the easy target, the one who got blamed for everything. I was going to build something real, something mine, something nobody could take away from me. I didn't know how yet. I didn't have a plan or connections or money, but I had something maybe more important. I had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. And let me tell you, that's a dangerous combination. Turns out when you got nothing, you get real creative real fast. That $20 didn't last long, maybe 2 days of dollar menu meals and gas station coffee. But I learned something important those first few weeks living in that van. Your hands can save you when everything else fails. I'd always been decent at yard work, the kind of stuff nobody really wants to do themselves. Mowing lawns, trimming hedges, pulling weeds in the hot sun, while everyone else stayed inside with their air conditioning. It wasn't glamorous, but it was work, and work meant money. I started small, like really small. I'd walk through wealthy neighborhoods early in the morning, looking for yards that needed help. Then I'd knock on doors and offer to do the work for cheap, sometimes even just for cash and a meal. Most people slammed the door in my face. Can't really blame them. I probably looked like trouble with my wrinkled clothes and exhausted eyes. But some people said yes. There was this one older lady, Mrs. Henderson, who took a chance on me. She needed her lawn mowed and her flower beds weeded, and she offered me $40 plus lunch. I worked like my life depended on it, because honestly, it kind of did. That lunch, by the way, was the best sandwich I'd ever eaten. Not because it was fancy or anything, just basic turkey and cheese. But when you've been surviving on gas station snacks, a homemade sandwich tastes like heaven. Mrs. Henderson even packed me leftovers. Didn't make a big deal about it. Just handed me a container and told me to come back next week. That next week turned into regular work. And Mrs. Henderson told her friends about me. Suddenly I had 3 clients, then 5, then 10. Word spreads fast in those neighborhoods when you do good work and don't charge an arm and a leg. I saved every single penny I could. Slept in that van for months, showered at the gym with membership I could barely afford, ate the cheapest food possible. My life was work, sleep, repeat, but I was building something, even if I couldn't see it yet. The real turning point came when I realized something. These wealthy people didn't just want their lawns mowed. They wanted their outdoor spaces to look like something out of a magazine. They wanted beautiful patios, stone fire pits, fancy garden beds with plants that looked expensive because they were expensive. And that's when I had my light bulb moment. Why was I just cutting grass when I could be creating entire outdoor living spaces? So I started learning everything I could about landscaping design, hardscaping, irrigation systems. I spent my evenings at the library, watching YouTube videos on my phone, taking notes like I was studying for the most important test of my life. My first big project almost didn't happen. This tech executive wanted a complete backyard renovation, something with multiple levels, a built-in barbecue area, and a garden that would impress his neighbors. He'd already gotten quotes from established companies, all of them charging $20,000 or more. I bid $8,000. He laughed at me, told me there was no way I could do quality work for that price. But I showed him my designs, rough sketches I'd drawn up, explained exactly how I'd source materials, how I'd do most of the heavy labor myself. I must have looked desperate enough to be honest, because he gave me a chance. That project nearly destroyed me. I worked 16-hour days for 3 weeks straight. My back was screaming. My hands were covered in blisters that turned into calluses. There were moments I thought I'd bitten off more than I could chew, that I'd end up owing money I didn't have and ruining the one shot I'd gotten. But I finished it, and it looked incredible. Better than incredible, actually. The executive's wife cried when she saw it, the good kind of crying. They had me out there for a reveal party where all their friends came over, and suddenly I had business cards in my hand and people asking when I could start on their yards. That one project changed everything. I went from barely surviving to actually making real money. Not enough to rent an apartment yet, but enough to upgrade from a van to a decent used truck and a small camper trailer. I was moving up in the world, literally living in a slightly bigger box. But I still wasn't satisfied. See, I'd figured out that the real money wasn't just in the labor. It was in being the complete package. These clients wanted convenience. They wanted someone who could handle everything from design to installation to maintenance. They didn't want to deal with multiple companies or coordinate different contractors. So I started expanding. I found a small piece of land outside the city, barely an acre, and I bought it for cheap because nobody wanted it. The soil was terrible. It was basically a dirt lot, but I saw potential. I started growing my own plants. Not just any plants, though. I researched what was expensive, what was hard to find, what landscapers in the area were constantly ordering from out of state. Rare succulents, exotic palms, specific varieties of ornamental grasses that thrived in our climate but weren't readily available. People thought I was crazy. Why would some kid with no formal training try to become a plant nursery? But that's the thing about having nothing to lose. You can take risks that seem insane to everyone else, because what's the worst that could happen? You end up broke? I'd already been there. The nursery took off faster than I expected. Landscapers started coming to me because I had plants they couldn't get anywhere else, and I sold them at reasonable prices. I wasn't trying to gouge anyone. I was trying to build relationships, build a reputation. But here's where I got really smart. I'd always been decent with computers, taught myself basic coding in high school when I was bored. So I built a simple program, nothing fancy, just a scheduling and management system that helped me track my projects, my plant inventory, and my client preferences. Then I had another idea. What if clients could manage their own irrigation systems through an app? What if they could check soil moisture, adjust watering schedules, get alerts when something needed attention, all from their phones? These were tech people with smart homes and automated everything. They'd love that. So I taught myself more programming. Spent countless nights hunched over my laptop in that camper trailer, learning about IoT devices and mobile app development. I was probably the only landscaper in the area who could code, and definitely the only coder who knew the difference between perennials and annuals. I started offering this smart irrigation system as part of my premium packages. Install a beautiful landscape, and get an app that lets you control everything. Clients ate it up. Suddenly, I wasn't just a landscaper. I was a tech-enabled landscaping service. I had a unique selling point that nobody else could match. The business grew. I hired my first employee, then my second, then my third. Bought better equipment. Rented a small office space. Moved out of that camper trailer and into an actual apartment. Nothing fancy, just a studio, but it had 4 walls and a real shower, and I could stand up without hitting my head. 5 years after getting kicked out with $20, I was running a legitimate business. I had 15 employees, a growing client list, and enough money in the bank that I didn't panic when unexpected expenses came up. I'd gone from spare part to business owner, from sleeping in a van to having my own place. But I still remembered every single night in that Walmart parking lot. Every meal skipped to save money. Every person who'd slammed a door in my face. Every moment my family's silence had felt like a weight on my chest. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered if they knew, if they'd heard through the grapevine that I was doing okay, that I hadn't crashed and burned like maybe they'd expected. Part of me hoped they had. Part of me hoped they felt even a tiny bit of regret. But mostly I just kept working. Because the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting ahead. And I was just getting started. Year 6 was when everything exploded. And I mean that in the best possible way. I'd gotten comfortable with my little operation, making decent money, living a normal life. But comfortable wasn't enough. I wanted to prove something, not just to my family, but to myself. The breakthrough started with an email I almost deleted. Some journalist from a major business magazine was doing a story on young entrepreneurs who'd built companies from nothing. Someone had apparently nominated me, probably one of my clients who liked to brag about their smart irrigation system at dinner parties. At first, I thought it was spam. Why would National Magazine care about some landscaper from California? But I responded anyway. Figured worst case scenario, I'd waste an hour on a phone call. Best case, maybe I'd get a tiny mention in some article nobody would read. The interview ended up lasting 3 hours. This journalist, Amanda was her name, was fascinated by my story. The whole journey from van to business owner. She kept saying it was exactly the kind of story her readers wanted to hear. I didn't tell her about my family. Kept that part vague. Just said I'd struck out on my own young and had to figure things out. Some things are too personal to share with strangers. But I told her everything else. The struggles, the failures, the moments I almost gave up. 2 months later, the article came out. Front page of the business section. Huge photo of me standing in front of one of my landscape projects. The headline read something like, "From $20 to 20 employees, how one young entrepreneur disrupted the landscaping industry." My phone basically exploded. Text messages from old classmates I hadn't heard from in years. Emails from potential clients. Messages on social media from people congratulating me or asking for advice. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once. But the real impact came from the business world. Suddenly I was getting calls from investors, from other companies wanting to partner up, from landscaping businesses in other states asking if they could license my irrigation software. My little app that I'd built in a camper trailer was apparently revolutionary. Within a week, I got invited to speak at a conference for sustainable landscaping practices. Me, speaking at a conference. I'd never even been to a conference before, let alone spoken at one. But I said yes because that's what you do when opportunities come knocking. The conference was in San Diego. Fancy hotel, hundreds of people in attendance. I wore my only suit, one I bought at a thrift store for client meetings. Stood backstage watching these polished professionals, wondering what I'd got myself into. But when I got on that stage and started talking, something clicked. These people didn't want polish. They wanted real. They wanted to hear from someone who'd actually done the work, who'd gotten dirt under their fingernails, who understood the industry from the ground up. I talked about sustainable practices, about smart water management, about how technology could make landscaping more efficient. And people listened, really listened. I got a standing ovation. Me, the spare part, getting a standing ovation from industry professionals. After that speech, I got approached by a representative from a major construction and landscaping corporation, one of those massive companies that operates in 15 states. They wanted to talk about acquiring my company. At first I laughed. My little operation wasn't for sale. But this guy was persistent. He kept talking numbers, talking about expansion opportunities, talking about how my technology could be implemented on a national scale. I agreed to one meeting, just to hear them out. That one meeting turned into 5 meetings. Each time they came back with a better offer, more incentives, more guarantees. They didn't just want my client list or my employees. They wanted my software, my systems, my entire approach. The final offer was insane. More money than I'd ever dreamed of having. Enough to set me up for life. But more importantly, they wanted to keep me on as a consultant, to help them implement my systems across their entire operation. I took 3 weeks to think about it. Talked to lawyers, talked to financial advisors, talked to myself in the mirror at 3 in the morning. This was everything I'd worked for, the validation that what I'd built actually mattered. In the end, I signed the papers, sold the company, kept my core team employed with better salaries than I could ever pay them, and walked away with more money than my 18-year-old self could have comprehended. So I went house hunting in California, looking at properties in areas I'd only visited to work on other people's yards. There was this one place, modern design, huge windows, beautiful outdoor space. The price tag was $1.2 million. 6 years ago, I was sleeping in a van. Now I was buying $1 million house with cash. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years creating beautiful outdoor spaces for other people, and now I finally had one of my own. The day I moved in was surreal. Standing in my own kitchen, looking out my own yard, knowing that nobody could take this away from me. I'd earned every square foot of this place. Every tile, every window, every blade of grass represented hours of work, and refusing to give up when things got hard. I posted one photo on social media. Just a simple shot of the front of the house. Caption that said something about new beginnings. Didn't tag the location. Didn't brag about the price. Just shared a moment I was proud of. The congratulations came flooding in. Friends I'd made in the industry, former clients, even some of my employees. It felt good, being celebrated for something I'd actually accomplished instead of being blamed for things I didn't do. And then, 3 days after I posted that photo, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered it anyway. It was my mom. Her voice was sweet, almost sickeningly so, telling me how proud she was, how she'd always known I'd do well, how the family had been following my success. The family, like they'd been cheering me on this whole time instead of erasing me from their lives. She didn't apologize for kicking me out, didn't mention Ryan's lie or dad harshness or the 6 years of complete silence. Just jumped straight into how happy she was for me and how she'd love to come visit my new place. I kept my voice neutral, asked her why she was really calling. There was a pause. Then she launched into it. Ryan was going through a divorce. Things had gotten messy. He needed a place to stay while he figured things out. Just temporarily, she assured me. And my house was so big. Surely I had a spare room for family. There it was. The real reason for the call. Not to congratulate me. Not to apologize. Not to actually be proud. They needed something. And suddenly I was family again. I told her I'd think about it and hung up. Sat in my beautiful new house. In a life I'd built with no help from any of them. And felt that old anger bubbling up. The spare part was useful again. How convenient. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I wasn't desperate or powerless or easy to manipulate. I'd learned to say no, to set boundaries, to protect what was mine. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of me. Not even family. Especially not family. Mom didn't take silence for an answer. Over the next week, I got texts, voicemails, emails, all with the same message wrapped in different words. Ryan needed help. Family helps family. Wouldn't I want someone to be there for me if I was struggling? The manipulation was so obvious, it would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. What really got me was how she rewrote history in every message, talking about how close we'd always been, how much they'd supported me growing up, how family sticks together through everything. Like the past 6 years of radio silence never happened. Like I hadn't been kicked out and abandoned. I ignored most of it. Focused on settling into my new place, working on my consulting gigs, enjoying the life I'd built. But they were persistent. Dad started calling too, leaving messages about responsibility and stepping up and being the bigger person. The bigger person. That's rich coming from a guy who threw his son out based on lies. Then Ryan himself sent a message. Long, rambling thing about how his life had fallen apart, how his wife had left him, how he'd lost his job, how he just needed a fresh start. Never once mentioned that he'd framed me for theft. Never acknowledged what he'd done. Just expected me to forget and forgive because blood is thicker than water or whatever. I was actually starting to think they'd give up when I came home one afternoon and found Mom sitting on my front porch. just sitting there with a container of banana bread, like we were going to have some heartwarming reunion. She must have got my address from social media or something, done some digging to find my exact location. She stood up when she saw me, big smile on her face, arms open for a hug I definitely wasn't going to give her. Started going on about how beautiful the house was, how successful I'd become, how she'd always believed in me. That last part almost made me laugh. Believed in me so much she didn't say a word when I got thrown out. I asked her flat out why she was there. No small talk, no playing nice, just straight to the point. She seemed surprised, like she expected me to just fall back into the role of the grateful son who was thrilled to see his mother. She shifted tactics, started talking about Ryan, how he was really struggling, how the divorce had been brutal, how he just needed a place to crash while he got back on his feet. She kept emphasizing the word family, like it was a magic spell that would make me forget everything. I pointed out that family is supposed to support each other, which they'd failed to do when I needed them most. Mom got this wounded look on her face, acted like I was being cruel and unreasonable, tried to tell me that what happened back then was complicated, that Dad had been under a lot of stress, that they'd done what they thought was right, not what was actually right, not what was fair, not what was true, just what was convenient for them. Protecting Ryan, keeping the peace, maintaining their perfect image of the golden child while the spare part got tossed aside. She pulled out her trump card then, started talking about forgiveness, about how holding grudges only hurts yourself, about how I'd want my family around when I had kids someday. Classic manipulation tactics. Make it about my character flaws instead of their actions. I told her I'd learned to forgive, that I'd moved on with my life. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it definitely doesn't mean opening my door to people who'd slammed theirs in my face. She didn't like that answer. The sweet act dropped for just a second, and I saw a real anger flash across her face. Then she tried a different approach. Started talking about the house, about how big it was, how many rooms I had, how I couldn't possibly need all that space for just myself. Wasn't it wasteful? Wasn't it selfish? Shouldn't I share my good fortune with people less fortunate? The audacity was breathtaking. She was literally trying to guilt me about having nice things that I'd earned through years of hard work, things I'd gotten with zero help from any of them, and she had the nerve to call me selfish. I reminded her that Ryan had gotten a full ride to college, a new truck, constant financial support from them throughout his 20s. I'd gotten kicked out with $20. So maybe, just maybe, I'd already given my share to the family, and then some. Maybe Ryan could figure things out the same way I had. Mom's face went red. She started raising her voice, telling me I'd changed, that success had made me cold, that I'd forgotten where I came from. I almost laughed at that one. I hadn't forgotten where I came from. I was standing in the proof of how far I'd traveled from there. She played her final card. Tears. Started crying about how she'd lost one son already in the divorce and couldn't bear to lose another. How all she wanted was for her boys to be okay. How I was breaking her heart. Peak manipulation, really? Making herself a victim in a situation where I was the one who'd been wronged. I stayed calm, told her that I wasn't lost. I was right here living my life. If she wanted to be part of that life, she could have reached out any time in the past 6 years. Could have called to check on me. Could have apologized. Could have actually been a mother. But she hadn't. And now she wanted to show up because she needed something. She stood up, grabbed her banana bread container like it was a weapon, called me selfish, ungrateful, cold-hearted, said I'd regret this someday, that family is all you have in the end, that I'd end up alone and bitter. Then she stormed off to her car and peeled out of my driveway like a teenager. I went inside and threw away the banana bread she'd left on the porch. Didn't even open it. Something about that felt symbolic. Rejecting even the smallest offering from someone who rejected me when it actually mattered. But I knew this wasn't over. Mom had been the warning shot. The fact that she'd shown up in person meant they were getting desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. I was right to be worried. 2 days later, I got home from a consultation meeting to find not just Mom but Dad and Ryan all standing on my porch. All three of them, united front, ready for the full court press. This was a big play. The moment they'd all planned out together. Dad started talking first, using his stern voice like I was still a kid who needed to be put in line. Went on about how I'd become successful, how I had responsibilities now, how people with means have an obligation to help those without. He actually used the word obligation, like I owed them something after everything they'd done to me. Mom chimed in with her emotional approach, talking about togetherness and healing and moving forward as a family. She'd clearly practiced this speech, had the tears ready to go, knew exactly which buttons to push, or at least which buttons used to work on the old version of me. Then Ryan spoke up, and this was the kicker. He had the audacity to act like I was being dramatic about the past. Suggested that maybe I'd misunderstood what happened, that everyone had been doing their best in a difficult situation, that it was time to let bygones be bygones. Rewriting history right to my face. He never admitted to lying, never apologized for framing me, just glossed over it like it was some minor miscommunication, instead of the lie that destroyed my relationship with my family and left me homeless at 18. The sheer nerve of this guy was almost impressive. They had clearly coordinated their attack. Dad would make a point. Mom would add emotional weight. Ryan would play the humble victim who just needed help. They'd probably rehearsed on the drive over, fine-tuned their strategy. Too bad for them I wasn't the same kid they'd kicked out. I let them finish their speeches. Didn't interrupt, didn't argue, just stood there and let them lay out their whole case. They seemed to take my silence as consideration, like maybe they were getting through to me. I could see hope starting to build on their faces. Then I spoke, calmly, clearly, with none of the emotion they'd been throwing around. I told them that I'd built this life from nothing, with no help from any of them, through years of struggle they knew nothing about because they'd never bothered to ask. Every brick in this house represented a choice they didn't make, a time they weren't there, a moment I survived alone. I reminded Dad that he'd called me a fraud and thrown me out without even checking if Ryan was lying. Told Mom that her tears now didn't erase 6 years of silence. And I looked Ryan straight in the eye and said I knew exactly what he'd done, and no amount of time would make me forget it. Dad tried to interrupt, to assert his authority or whatever, but I wasn't having it. I told him I wasn't 18 anymore, wasn't under his roof or his rules, wasn't a spare part he could discard when convenient. I'd become the engine, the one driving my own life, and I wasn't about to let them hitch a ride. The looks on their faces were something else. Shock, anger, disbelief. Like they genuinely couldn't comprehend that I wasn't going to cave, that the spare part had the audacity to say no to them. Mom tried one more time with the tears and the guilt, but I shut it down, told her that real family shows up before you need something from them, not just when they want something from you. And with that, I walked past all 3 of them, went into my house, and closed the door. I watched through the window as they stood there arguing with each other, probably trying to figure out their next move. Eventually they left, but I knew this wasn't over. People like that don't give up when they want something. They just change tactics. After the porch confrontation, things got weird. Mom's car started cruising past my house at random times, slow enough that I knew she was checking if I was home. Dad left voicemails at all hours, sometimes angry ranting about disrespect, sometimes sad talk about regrets. The inconsistency was meant to keep me off balance, make me feel guilty enough to crack. But I'd learned something important. Guilt only works when you actually did something wrong. Ryan took a different approach, posting vague social media content about hardship and betrayal. Classic victim narrative from the guy who'd actually victimized me. Some mutual acquaintances reached out, suggesting I extend an olive branch. They didn't know the full story. I didn't bother explaining. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I came home from dinner to find my front door open, not broken, just open. After calling the cops and waiting in my truck, I discovered someone had been inside with a key. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, but someone had gone through my whole house. The real estate agent. Mom had probably sweet-talked information out of them, maybe gotten a key somehow. I changed all the locks that night and installed a security system with cameras. 2 days later, the doorbell camera caught Mom and Ryan trying their key. They looked surprised when it didn't work. I saved the footage. The harassment escalated. Dad started calling my former clients, telling them I was unreliable. I had to do damage control, explaining I had a family situation. It was exhausting. Every day brought some new attempt to manipulate or undermine me. They were trying to make my life so difficult that letting Ryan stay would seem easier than dealing with their interference. Then came the evening that ended it all. All three showed up at 8 on a Tuesday. They looked desperate. Dad's face red, Mom's mascara smudged, Ryan looking like he hadn't slept in days. I opened the door, tired of being harassed in my own home. Dad launched into how I was wealthy now, how I had a responsibility to family. Mom jumped in with emotional manipulation about blood being thicker than water. But Ryan set things off. He stepped forward, got in my face, and told me I had to help him. Not asked, told. Said I owed him. That's when clarity hit. They needed to hear the complete truth. I told them about sleeping in my van in Walmart parking lots, eating dollar menu items once a day, showering at a gym, working 16-hour days with bleeding hands, about building something from nothing while they were comfortable, never once wondering if I was alive or dead. I told Dad he'd throw me out without investigating whether Ryan was lying. Told Mom her tears were 6 years too late. Told Ryan I knew he'd gambled away thousands and blamed me, that his lies had cost me everything. I told all three that they taught me family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when things get hard. And they'd proven they weren't my family. Dad got angry, yelling about ingratitude and disrespect. Mom tried guilt trips about forgiveness. Ryan made one last attempt, voice-breaking, talking about needing one chance, the same chance nobody gave me at 18. I told them I wasn't refusing to help because I was cruel or wanted revenge. I was refusing because enabling people doesn't help them. It delays the lessons they need to learn. Ryan needed to figure things out through hard work and consequences, just like I had. I told them I had plenty of heart for people who deserved it, earned it, reciprocated it. Just not for people who'd throw me away and only came back when they wanted something. Ryan got aggressive, saying I'd regret this. I told them all to leave and not come back, that if they showed up again, I'd call police. If they contacted my clients again, I'd get a lawyer. Before they left, I called out one more thing. They called me the spare part my whole life, treated me like I was disposable. But I'd learned I wasn't a spare part. I was the engine driving my own life. And they weren't getting my vehicle. Not now, not ever. I closed the door and watched the camera as they argued in my driveway. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I changed my phone number, blocked them on social media, set my security system to alert me if their faces appeared. I was done being accessible to people who only access me when they wanted something. Life got really good after that. Without the constant stress, I could focus on things that mattered. I started dating someone amazing, invested in community projects helping young people kicked out by their families. I built something beautiful, not just a business or house, but the life itself. Surrounded myself with real family, the chosen kind that earns a title instead of demanding it. So, what do you think about this whole situation? Was I too harsh with my family, or did they get what they deserved? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I genuinely love to hear different perspectives on this. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more content like this, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. A like would really help push this video to more people who might need to hear it. And if you've got your own story about family drama or setting boundaries, share it in the comments. Sometimes it helps to know we're not alone in dealing with this stuff. Thanks for watching, and remember, you're worth more than how people treated you when you had nothing.